Okay, I'm going to read to you from my letter to the editor that was published by the New York Times. Now, bear in mind that the New York Times gets probably 450 billion letters to the editor every day, and out of that 478 trillion letters, they select 3 or 4. So you'd think they'd be pretty careful about the ones they select. And I've noticed that the New York Times letters to the editor often reflect the editorial views of the New York Times. And I don't have a problem with it, generally with the editorial views, particularly because in one of my cases that I had pending before the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, in a case which I later won in the United States Supreme Court, they wrote a full-page editorial supporting our position in that case. And the only problem I had with their entire article was when I called them up and I talked to the person who wrote the article, and I suggested, quite rationally and logically I thought, that they put a picture of me on a horse in the middle of the page, or maybe in the page next to it. And I even offered to provide them with a picture, which, since I don't ride horses, I'd have to do a little photoshopping, but I was willing to go to that trouble and expense, and he turned me down flat. And I said, well, at least put my name in there in all caps and bold. He said, we don't put the names of the lawyers in when we're discussing cases. So I knew immediately I was dealing with a lower form of intellect, and I just let it go. But I agreed with the opinion, obviously. It was a well-written opinion. Almost copied my brief verbatim. You can't get much better than that. Remember that, you law students out there. So, but I find that there, whether I agree or disagree, the letters tend to often support and reflect the views of the editorial board. So I was really dismayed, disgusted, shocked, horrified, nauseated, you pick a verb, when I read this particular letter, and it was pretty much consistent with the other letters about this field. And I'm talking about the recent Supreme Court decisions, which most of you know, to your great surprise and chagrin, I supported, even though they don't necessarily they're not necessarily in line with my politics. I don't care, because when we're talking about the law, you shouldn't be talking about politics, which is a fact that this particular letter writer missed entirely. So I'm going to read, with your indulgence, and I'm putting these glasses on not because I need them to read. I resent the implication. I'm putting them on because they make me look intellectual. Agreed? You don't get much more intellectual than that. All right, so here goes. This is to the editor. Here I was thinking that the justices were trying to resuscitate their tarnished reputation after their egregious ruling last year reversing Roe v. Wade. Here's the part that I love. Listen carefully. Going against the wishes of the vast majority of the American people. I'll come back to that. Then this, dare I say it, moron goes on to say, I was hopeful because there have been some very reasonable rulings this session. I was particularly relieved that they ruled against state legislatures that wanted complete control over elections, which could have ended our democracy. But I was wrong. As became obvious when they took away a 40-year precedent in overturning affirmative action. Women, minorities, their needs are dispensable. But not religious Christians. The justices also ruled that a web designer could refuse to serve LGBTQ LMNOP people because of religious beliefs. I'm going to repeat that one again because I'm going to come back to it. Because of religious beliefs. The Supreme Court, made up of unelected justices, seems to be the most powerful branch of government right now. And the justices are busy making over this country in their own conservative political image. And this, here we go again, listen to this part. They are completely out of touch with what, and I'm underlining this and in bold, with what the majority of the American people want. This guy didn't pass 7th grade civics. The purpose of the Supreme Court is not to give the American people what they want. It's exactly the opposite. If their job was to give the American people what they want, they could never overturn a statute as being unconstitutional, because almost by definition, laws that are passed by the House, the Senate, and signed by the President are reflective of what the American people want. So if that's the criteria, then they should stop scrutinizing statutes and laws, well, it's the same thing, laws, to see if they're past constitutional muster. All you need to know is, hey, is this what the people want? So really they should be governing by polls. Now that's so obvious and such a stupid thing to say. Why do they put that in there? And it's not that, it's filled with nonsense. For example, this thing here, actually I love this. He says, women, minorities, their needs are dispensable. Well, first place, none of these cases about which he's complaining had anything to do with women. And it had nothing really to do with the needs of minorities. Then he says, but not religious Christians. The justices also ruled that a web dispenser could refuse to serve LGBTQAFPC people because of religious beliefs. That's not what they ruled. If the Supreme Court, the New York Times, before they print a letter when somebody complaining about a decision of the Supreme Court, should at least read the letter to see if it reflects that the person who wrote the stupid letter actually read the decisions. The web page designer said, I don't want to design a web page celebrating gay marriage because of my religious beliefs. That was her personal reason for not wanting to do it. It could have been because she just doesn't like gay people. It could have been anything. Because they didn't take that case on the basis of religious freedom. It came to the court on two grounds. One had to do with religious beliefs, and the other had to do with freedom of speech. They rejected the issue relating to religious beliefs and didn't even discuss it. They took the case on the basis of freedom of speech. And anybody who's actually read the Constitution, which apparently doesn't include this moron, knows that a state statute cannot override First Amendment rights. And the court got this decision absolutely right. If they had said, well, she could refuse to serve people, that is different. She didn't refuse to serve anybody. She said, you can't make me say something, put it on a web page, put it wherever, make me put words in my mouth and tell me I have to say those as a matter of law. That violates my freedom of speech. And she was absolutely right, and this moron didn't even understand that. So it's disturbing that so many people, and I remember when Jack Kennedy said he didn't trust liberals. And I remember at the time thinking, well, that's strange, because I loved Jack Kennedy, but I also loved Roosevelt. I grew up in a family of liberal Democrats, meaning, we supported Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman. Kennedy said that, and I thought, and Kennedy, we considered him a liberal Democrat. Years later, I came to understand what he meant. He was talking about ideologues. He said he didn't trust ideologues, and I don't either. And that's what's going on here. People looking at their ideology, they're looking at the results that they want, and if they don't get the results that they want in terms of policy, then the decision must be terrible. Well, the decisions weren't terrible. I happen to think, and also on this question of the student loans. They made that decision based on the authority that was granted in the statute itself. And they said that the statute did not give Biden the authority to cancel student loans. And Nancy Pelosi said that, and then she later changed her mind. But she was right when she said it. He did not have the statutory authority to do it. Does that mean they shouldn't cancel student loan debt? I hear all these people say, well, that's not fair. I didn't go to college, and why should I pay for somebody else's debt? Well, you could also say you also don't use the federal highway out in Montana, but that doesn't mean you're not supposed to pay for it. Right? It's not like there's a special tax levied on people who didn't go to college to pay for the loans of people who did. And other people say, well, I paid my college loan. Why shouldn't these people? Because maybe the degree they got didn't provide them with the financial reward that was represented to them, which is usually the case here. That's why they're not paying them back. It's not because they're bad people trying to welch out a loan. It's because they can't get the jobs that allows them to pay off this debt, and then the interest keeps going up, and they settle forever, and then basically you're crushing them with this. So I'm all for forgiving the student loan debt. The arguments to the contrary are nothing more than petty and selfish and mean and stupid. But that doesn't mean that what Biden did was legally sufficient. That's something on which people should campaign. Get rid of these damn Republicans. Get enough Democrats in there. Change the law. Give the president the authority, or even do it yourselves. Cancel the student loan debt, but do it through the political process, and don't complain because the courts have said it hasn't been done through the political process yet. Okay, so let's try to understand government, how it works, what it does, how it's supposed to operate. Let's make sure before we start popping off opinions, and this goes for the right and the left and even some of us in between, just focus and be fair. Okay, jumping to conclusions, attacking the court, supporting the court because you like or don't like the result, that's not fair to the court. It's not fair to the American people. It's not fair to the political process, and it's stupid. So enough for that. So now you got me all wound up, and I'm mad at the Republicans. This is just gonna be short. One of these days I'm gonna take more time about it. But we had in the last week record-setting worldwide temperatures. Worldwide temperatures, and what does that mean? That means the seas are record heat. And when you have hot water all over the world, you're going to get hurricanes, you're going to get tornadoes, you get all of this stuff because a little something about wind, which you may or may not know. Why do we have wind in the first place? We have wind because you have all this surrounding thing that surrounds the earth, and it's called air. And what do you mean you've never heard of it? Santos, what the hell are you doing in here? And I want to talk with you about this whole thing and comparing yourself to Rosa Parks. The only thing you have in common is that you think you're a bus driver, and she thought she was a bus driver too. But I don't even want to get into that. I want you to shut up and just listen to me for once, okay? Yes, air. And it surrounds the earth. And why doesn't air just fly off into the air? That's kind of a stupid thing to say. Why doesn't the air just fly off to the other planets? Why doesn't it just dissipate into outer space? Because we have this thing that starts with a G and that rhymes with T and it stands for gravity. Please don't analyze everything I say, okay? Lord, you people are so picky. I'm surprised I let you in here. So, and then it goes for you out there watching too. Okay, I know there's nobody watching, but if there was, I would be upset with you too. So, gravity holds the air. And then what does our Earth do? Does it just sit there? No. Our planet is not lazy. The planet Earth is quite energetic. And what does it do? It spins, like a lot of you do. Now, George, stop spinning in your chair, okay? People don't need to see that to understand what I'm talking about. The Earth spins. And when it spins, what happens with all this air that's attached to it by gravity? It pulls it along with it. So you get spinning planet causes spinning air. And that's why the air moves in one direction in the northern hemisphere, in another direction in the southern hemisphere. It's all related to the spinning of the Earth and the gravity. Now, normally that's not a problem. In fact, it's nice. It gives us nice ocean breezes. Breezes that cool us in the summertime. You know, the breeze and I, I'm sorry. So, but when you throw hot air in there, when you throw hot water, hot ocean, causes heat to rise, and now rising hot air collides with the cooler air, and what do? You get turbulence. And now you've got spinning air and all this turbulence around it caused by the heat. And that's where you get all these problems. And there's a lot more sophisticated than that, but that's the general idea. So right now, we've had, last week, record high worldwide temperatures, and it looks like that's going to continue. And that is directly caused by global warming. By definition, it's warming and it's the globe. And these damn Republicans are still out there. They attack that Ms. Cortez, who was, I guess, one of the leading voices on this New Deal, the environmental New Deal. Oh, these liberals, they're always trying to, do the environment this and like environmentalists. That's a bad word, right? If you're an environmentalist, well, you're some sort of kind of communist or some damn fool thing. And the reason they do that, and they're quite upfront about it, is because what's causing global warming? We know what's causing global warming. I mean, I have a physics degree, but you don't need a physics degree to understand how this works. You get carbon dioxide in the air as a result of internal combustion engines, and that carbon dioxide acts like a blanket that surrounds the Earth, and then you have the greenhouse effect. What's the greenhouse effect? Well, you're in a greenhouse, and the hot sun comes in, even in the winter, but the sun comes in, it warms the air inside the greenhouse, and then that warm air can't escape because it's surrounded by glass. So the glass lets the sun in, which heats the air, but then the glass traps the air. So that air just keeps getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Well, the same thing happens in outer space. The CO2 blanket acts like the glass of the greenhouse. So the sun comes through that, it hits the air, it heats it up, it heats the oceans, it heats everything, and then that hot air rises, but it doesn't escape. Because instead of going out to outer space, which is where it should go, it boom, rams up against that CO2 and it stays there, and then it just keeps getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Now, of course, it's not static. Some of it escapes, some of it does, but that's basically what's going on. And we all know it. It's like I say, you don't need a physics degree to know that, and I know, because I have a physics degree. So, and I knew it even without the physics degree. All you have to do is read the newspaper, but not the New York Times editorial page, as I just talked about. If you do, don't read the letters to the editor. So, what's going on with the Republican Party? Well, I'll tell you what's going on with the Republican. This is why I'm not a Republican. It's not because of the social issues. It's not because I hate Donald Trump. It's because, as far as I can remember, going all the way back to when I was a kid and Teddy Roosevelt was president, these people, starting really with John D. Rockefeller, have been like this with big business, and particularly the oil industry. When Teddy Roosevelt was a trust buster, and here's the kind of sort of the irony, he was enforcing the Sherman Antitrust Act. The Sherman Antitrust Act was written by General Sherman. Remember him? He burned out Savannah. This was his younger brother, who was a senator from New York, and he's the one who introduced the Sherman Antitrust Act shortly after the Civil War. It doesn't really enforce much. It was just kind of there, but it was a trust busting to stop monopolies. Well, the monopolies came into full bloom with Carnegie and steel, and Rockefeller with oil, and various others, Mellon and Frick and so on. You should read Mellon's Millions sometime. So Teddy Roosevelt said, "You're not on my watch. You're not going to monopolize. You're not going to." One of the things they were doing, Carnegie this much. He'd go into these companies all over the South. We used to have steel mills all over this country, and he would go into a local steel mill. And he said, "Well, I want to buy your steel mill," and he'd offer him some ridiculously low price. The guy would say, "No, I'm not going to do it. This is my steel mill. It's been in my family for 3,000 years." And so Carnegie said, "Okay." Well, then he built his own steel plant, and then he'd give the steel away. Well, eventually these guys would go under, and Carnegie would just come in and buy them up for a song. And he did that. That's how he created U.S. Steel. So it's all over the country they did that, particularly in the South. And that was one of the things that depending on how and why it's done, is a violation of the antitrust laws as well. And I know a little something about it. I actually had an antitrust case in the United States Supreme Court. So this is my field, one of my fields. But I understand this, and I know the history of this quite well, particularly the efforts of Teddy Roosevelt, as well as the origins of the antitrust laws, which, this is, I'm sure, too much detail, but I found this kind of interesting in some of my research. This is going off topic. This goes back sort of to the roots of the Civil War. Judge Toney wrote the Dred Scott decision, and he's been tarred and feathered for that ever since, because that's the one where he said a runaway slave is property. And if you read his decision, he said because the English didn't view black folks as human beings, and that theory was carried over from England when they wrote our Constitution. That's why they're not treated as citizens or even people. And that's why they could treat them as property. He vehemently disagreed with that philosophy, but he said, I have no choice because it's in the Constitution. Most people don't know that. But Tony also wrote a bunch of decisions relating to patent law, and these patent law decisions, patent law came way before the antitrust laws. Remember, it's in the Constitution. And, patent law is my specialty. I'm a patent lawyer. So, patent law, the decisions by Judge Tony regarding patent law cases formed, to a large extent, the background for the Sherman Antitrust Act, which was not passed until after the Civil War, which means after Judge Tony's opinions. So and I hope that's not too distracting. I found it fascinating. I love history because there's all these threads and things that intertwine that you never think about until you actually start reading it. Someday we'll discuss the origins of the Punic Wars and World War I, World War II, maybe even the present war in Ukraine, which really goes back to the Crimean War, which was in 1870 something, I think. So, I'm sorry, that's just kind of how my mind works. And you're watching this, if you're watching this, so you deserve what you get. So, Rockefeller and Carnegie and Frick and even Mellon with the banking, those people did everything they could to monopolize their industries, railroads, what's his name, Flagler with the railroads, I think of his name from New York, the guy who had the Long Island Ferry. They call him the Admiral, it'll come to me, Dutch name. Anyway, he was to railroads what these other people were to commodities. It'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, so that was a Republican law. The antitrust law is being enforced by a Republican president, Teddy Roosevelt. But then, and he had no real luck. I remember Carnegie once said that the president has his lawyers, I have mine. And he had a valid point. It was a tough slog for Teddy, and he never really made that much progress. But you give him credit for trying. Then he didn't run for re-election. Taft ran, and when Taft wasn't busy eating everything in the Capitol, he was hanging out with Rockefeller and his friends, and he became their staunch. They became his staunch supporters, and he was their staunch supporters. They became great friends, and that was the beginning of the end of the Republican Party's flirtation with decency with Teddy Roosevelt. Ever since Taft, it's been like this. And you have that to this day with the Republican Party running interference for anything that's going to threaten the profits of the oil companies, and they don't give a damn what happens to this planet. They just want to get those campaign dollars so they can get reelected, and that's cynicism to me is at the heart and soul of the Republican Party. That and their tax cuts for the wealthy, and then their other two unholy alliances are with the people who make guns and worse ammunition, and the American people in poll after poll after poll after poll after poll want these companies reined in, and the Republicans never allow it, no matter how hard the Democrats try. And that's because they get a massive amount of campaign contributions from these armament manufacturers. And the last one of those, the unholy trilogy, are the prescription drug companies, which do a lot of good, obviously, and a lot of their profits go into research and development, so it's not all like they're just raking those over the coals. But George Bush Jr. introduces the bill to prescribe prescription drugs to be paid for by Medicare, and he takes out of the bill, and made sure that there was nothing in the bill that would allow the government to negotiate prices. So basically, Big Pharma just says, here's what we're charging, and the government says, oh, okay, whatever you want, and here you are, and here's the cash, and here's the cash, and here's the cash, and here's the cash, and Big Pharma says, thanks. Oh, incidentally, Republicans, we've started some more political action campaign committees for you. So it's just this raw, blatant, but most people don't pay any attention to this, so they don't know. And you've got all these Trump supporters out there who are saying, well, I just went to high school, and I'm working my tail end off and barely getting by. In the meantime, all these liberals are screwing me all the time. No, it ain't liberals that's screwing you. Okay? It's the Republicans who are screwing you. Wake up. Smell the roses or the coffee or whatever the hell it is you feel like smelling at a particular time of the day. So this is this insidious relationship between big business, special interest money, and the campaign contributions they make to the Republican Party, which is what really drives the Republican Party policy, not on the social issues. Those are distractions. The LGBTQ issues are distraction. And ask Ron DeSantis. He's apparently doing a movie about this. The crime in the streets. These are all legitimate political issues, but they're distractions from what really is happening. The reality of real politics and real government intersection in this country is about big money. And if you don't understand that, then you don't understand economics, you don't understand history, and you don't understand what's going on. So if you're one of those people that says, well, I love Donald Trump, or all the Republicans are great guys because the Democrats that favor crime or defunding the police or some other damn fool thing, I hope I've gotten through to you. And if I'm hurting your feelings, I'm really sorry. I'm a sensitive guy, and I hate hurting anybody's feelings. But yet I do it all the time.